lot of self-doubt. I began to hear no a lot. No, I can't have that internship. No, this isn't the right job for you. No, I don't want to take you on a second date. It was very, very deflating for someone who never really tolerated no very well. Like, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I get my way. So that was really hard for me, and it began to chip away at my self-esteem pretty dramatically. It only took a couple no's before I was the worst person, I was the ugliest person, I was the dumbest person. All of these thoughts were in my head. And that caused a lot of injury. That negative self-talk causes a lot of injury, coupled with the fear of the unknown. Up to this point in life, for the first 22 years, my life was pretty laid out, right? You go to preschool, you go to elementary school, and then you graduate high school, and you go to college, and then no one tells you what happens after college. Like, there really should be a next step, and for some people that's grad school, but that was another no. My dad was like, listen, dude, you want to do grad school, you gotta foot that bill. No. So that wasn't gonna go down. So all of that together led to some really poor lifestyle choices. I worked only enough to support the poor choices I was making, which involved drinking, partying, that whole scene. I even stayed living in Fayetteville because it was a lot closer to my friends. And I was doing all of that, now I can see, to fill this void that I was filling. I was trying to heal the negative self-talk wounds with these worldly behaviors, we will call them. Then on October 15th, 2006, life got really real. That was the day I got my positive pregnancy test. And that was awful. I was overwhelmed, terrified, in total disbelief, completely shamed, so confused, so mad, so sad, and all at once when I saw that little pink plus sign. Like I said, I was raised in the church. I was raised by fabulous people, and this was so shameful. Like, who could do this? This isn't something that you should be doing. Thankfully, because of that upbringing, I went back to what I knew. First of all, I knew that I could not go to said fabulously raising people without a game plan. I'm also super type A, so we have to know what's happening and when. And I had to pray, and I prayed hard for 3 days, very, very hard. And the same thing kept coming back to me every time I prayed, and that was adoption. I had been seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist throughout my difficult transition, and the psychiatrist I was seeing had just successfully adopted a baby infant through a lawyer in Fayetteville. God does not put people in your life just because. He, in this particular instance, he put her in my life to help me through this transition, but then also to kind of show me what adoption might look like. It made it a lot more real option than if I hadn't seen that firsthand. And so I called that lawyer, and I made an appointment to meet with her, and then I called my mom, and I said, Mom, are you gonna be in Fayetteville? I need to talk to you. And she said, well, I have to take your sister down there for an appointment. And I said, okay, so I'll meet you at where my sister's appointment is. And I was terrified. Oh, I was so scared. She was gonna be so disappointed in me. How could I do this to her? Like, she had done such a good job. She'd done her job. Why couldn't I do mine? So I go and I meet her and I say, Mom, here's the deal, I'm pregnant. But I think I have a plan. And that plan is adoption. And I want you to come with me to meet with the lawyer, and we are gonna figure out what this looks like. And she's like, okay. I mean, I don't really know what I kind of expected her to say, and I'm sure that's not actually how it went, but she was very supportive of my choice, and that meant everything. That was everything. So we went and we met with the lawyer, and the lawyer was like, wait a minute, you've been pregnant for how long and you're sitting in my office? And I was like, well, she goes, give me a couple weeks, come back, and we'll talk about this again. I said, okay. But I kept praying, and I knew that this is what needed to happen. I mean, here I am 6 weeks along, and I knew that this is how this needed to go down. I didn't have insurance. I didn't even have a full-time job. Like, I was a nanny for jerks, and I worked at Target. Like, there was no benefits. I could hardly pay my rent. What business would I have had raising this gift from God the way that he or she at this point deserved to be raised? So we go through that. We begin to tell those really special people in your life, the people who are gonna love on you no matter what choice you make. And their life is only made because of those people, I'm just convinced. I got support from all the people I'd shared it with at that point that just reaffirmed what I was going through. I had gotten a job. I got a full-time job about 2 weeks later at Signature Bank. And within this one branch where there were like 12 people who worked, there were 3 who had been adopted and 2 that were adopting kids. I felt surrounded by it. And I feel like that was a God thing because that made it gave me a lot more exposure to it. It made it okay. It made it less taboo than I felt like it was at the time. So we're beginning to scar over a little bit, right? These cuts, they're starting to scar over. But negative self-talk, it runs deep, dude. That's like putting Band-Aids on a broken leg. I mean, your scar begins to form, but nothing really begins to heal. So, I also surrounded myself with my friends. I couldn't keep anything from them. I had a great circle of friends. We spent a lot of time talking about how we were to refer to the embryo growing in my uterus, and it was determined that a bun in the oven was too cliche, so it became a biscuit. And to this day, I refer to that baby as Biscuit. And now, he'll be 9 years old in April, but Biscuit is his name for me. So, as going forward, as I refer to Biscuit, that's what I'm talking about. I got scared again, right? I got really scared about how are people gonna perceive this? I had already lost friends. I had one girl tell me, how could you be so selfish to give away a baby? I had one friend tell me she couldn't be my friend anymore because she couldn't support someone that can make a decision like that. And that all weighs on you. I wasn't about to tell a total stranger that I was going through something like this. And thankfully, I lost a lot of weight in the first trimester, so I got to just keep wearing the same clothes. And I didn't look really like a pregnant person because I was already kind of a big girl, so it hid well. But it was really scary still. There's still a lot of judgment. It's still kind of taboo. There was so much shame. Shame is probably the deepest cut. Shame is almost a deeper cut than negative self-talk, I think. And the shame was the shame I felt like I had bestowed on my parents, on my whole family. Like, how could I do this to my siblings? I still had a sister that had not even graduated high school yet. What have I done to her social life? The answer is nothing, but you don't recognize that at the time. But there's a lot of shame there, and it hurts. It hurts bad. And even once it starts to scar over, it hurts. I was scared about his future. You know, thankfully this lawyer was very faithful, and she did a lot of praying. When we met with her the first time, she said, here's what I do. I have a list of 15 people who want babies. I have you as a birth mom. I pray for 4 to 6 weeks, and God tells me who I need to match you up with. And I said, okay. And she said, but I need to know if you have any non-negotiables. Like, what is it important to you that he have? And we didn't know it was a he. What is important to you that this baby have? And I said, I need parents who, first and foremost, have a faith, believe in something bigger. I need this child to know that he is so loved by God, and he is so loved by Jesus, and he is so loved by me that I'm making this decision for him. And I need parents that are going to communicate that. I need education to be important. I need that to be a focus for them. And if they might be hog fans, that could also be cool. And so she prayed, and sure enough, he got an engineer and an author, like that actually authored books and stuff, that are graduated from the University of Arkansas where they met, so they are Go Hogs all the way, and they're Methodist. I was like, holy cow, these people are way better suited to be this kid's parent. So it all worked out. I mean, that part, I felt a little more reassured about that. But I was then scared about my future. Again, because that shame is so deep. Could anybody love me? Could anybody love someone that had gone through something like this? Would I ever be a good mom? Would I ever be good enough to raise a child? Could God ever forgive me for this? I mean, that was like one of the worst fears, because nobody wants to feel that way. And again, that's all kind of Satan speak, right? Because I think I learned later that he does forgive. It was very scary. The day that Biscuit was born, prior to Biscuit's birth, I had nightmares. Pregnancy makes you have weird dreams. If you aren't pregnant or have never been pregnant, brace yourself, because they are crazy. But the recurring dream I had while I was pregnant with Biscuit was that he was born and he was all by himself and there was nobody there for him, and the doctors took him away and I never knew if he was okay. And that wasn't okay for me, because this situation wasn't about how do I get rid of this responsibility from my life. This was about how do I make the right choice for this baby that God has created when I know I'm not the right person for it. And it became imperative to me that I see Biscuit with his family before I leave the hospital or before he leaves the hospital. That's the only way I was going to know that he was okay. And the day he was born, my mom was in the room, the lawyer was in the room, and his mom was in the room, because I wanted her to be there from the very beginning. And it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was amazing. And I got Diet Sprite afterwards. And it's weird, the things you remember. But the next day, as you're coming down off those hormones, because everything is kind of adrenaline driven through that whole process, it began to feel less amazing, began to feel a little more sad. Leaving that hospital by myself, well, not by myself, my mom was there. She's awesome. Like, if you ever need a hand holder, she is your girl. But left the hospital and went home and continued to pray, because I knew that it had only begun. The healing had only begun. The negative self-talk subsided for a while, so that was a good thing. And there was a glimmer of the sacred coming in. I began to feel a glimmer of sacred, because at this point, there was almost a peace about me as I left the hospital that day. And that peace could only come from God. I mean, that's the only place it could have come from. I knew I made the right choice. I never questioned, did I make the right choice? That peace can only come from God. That doesn't mean I had forgiven myself, because I had still shamed my family. I had still made terrible choices that put me in this position anyway. And so that meant I couldn't celebrate. There was no more joy. No birthdays, no Christmas. I hated it all. I did not want to celebrate. And that was hard because we are a celebrating people, I tell you what. So removing that was a big deal for me, and it was punishing. And that's how I felt like it needed to be. That's what I felt like I deserved. And then one year, 2011, I'm pretty sure it was 2011, we hosted at Central a service of comfort and hope for people who have a hard time with the holidays. And I thought, I really struggle with the holidays, so I think we should check this out. Well, scheduling conflicts and all this other stuff. It ended up being me and my mom and Vivian Dunaway in the chapel after Bible study on a Sunday night, and the chapel was still set up beautifully. We had this gorgeous cross laying down the aisle with a bunch of holes in it, and everybody had put their little paper things in the holes. And my mom and Vivian and I sat there in the chapel for an hour probably, crying and praying and sharing, and it was the most draining and refreshing thing I had ever done up to that point. And after that, I began to accept the forgiveness God had been extending me from the beginning. For that year, I didn't hate Christmas, and I didn't hate Thanksgiving, and I didn't hate all these celebrations that I had hated before. Like, I wasn't decorating, baby steps, right? But I allowed myself to have a good time. So that's when I feel like the sacred began. I started coming back to church. I started surrounding myself with people who lifted me up and not people who dragged me down. Then it was about 2 years later, and God brought me David. And David is my husband, and he is everything that I'm not. Like, I am high-strung and type A and crazy about all the things, and he is laid back and comforting and so wise, and he's just awesome. God made him for me. But beginning that courtship brought on a whole new set of fears, right? Because now I have to tell him my story. What happens if in 18 years this Biscuit shows up at my front door and I have to explain to David who Biscuit is? Like, that's going to be an awkward conversation. So we should probably have that kind of earlier on. Plus, now I'm opening myself up for potentially more wounds, right? Now I'm allowing myself to be scarred even further. And when I had a conversation with David about this fairly early on, I was like 29. I was like, I'm not getting any younger. We need to have these important conversations so I can weed you out if this isn't going to work. And so he and I had this conversation, and he gave me a hug, and he said, that is the most loving thing I have ever heard someone do. And I knew that plus all the other things. This was the man God made for me. And that's exactly right. And I really began to feel sacred because now all these worries, all these fears I'd had before, would anyone ever be able to love me? Would I be single forever? They're all absolving, right? Because now God has brought me my husband. And now I get to plan the biggest celebration of all celebrations. That's my wedding. It was the best day. It was the best day. All the days leading up to it were the best days. Like, I loved it. I got my celebration back. And that was amazing. And then fast forward a little bit longer. And the thing about these fears is they don't ever go away. Sometimes they come back, and Satan sometimes brings them back in really ugly, inopportune ways. And he brought back in a big way when we decided it was time to start having a baby, or trying to have a baby. And I was sitting in my doctor's office, my OB's office, over the summer, and I said, I keep having this thought that the only chance I was gonna have at having a baby, I blew. I gave the only baby I'm gonna have get away. And she was like, oh girl, like that's not even a thing. First of all, here's the number of a counselor, you should probably call her. And second of all, that's not real. And when she said that, it really clicked. That wasn't real. That was Satan. That was Satan saying that. I started seeing that counselor, and other things happened, and now guess what? I'm pregnant, yay! And I'm so excited, and David is so excited, and I've got this hopefully going to be beautiful baby girl growing inside me for the last 28 plus weeks, who loves praise music, let me just say. She just discovered kicking me in the lungs, so I'm surprised I haven't gasped yet. She's due on June 27th, and this is God's redemption baby for me, and I really believe that. I was obedient when it was hard, because I'm going to tell you what, growing a baby for 9 months and then leaving it for someone else to raise is not easy. But it's what needed to happen. It's how it needed to go down. And God is the only way I could have done that. The only way I could have done that. The only way I did it. And so now, even when I'm scarred, which I still am, right? There's still lots of hurts. And even when I'm scared, I know that I am sacred. And I know that all of you are sacred too. And I am so thankful that you guys have let me share my story with you tonight. Yeah, I guess that's it.